Along with the upgrade to Unreal Engine 5.5, Ark Survival Ascended has now received a PS5 Pro patch, which promises increased performance by using PlayStation's PSSR, along with improvements to shadow quality. By looking at the resolution scale, we can determine what internal resolution each device is running at, which is then upscaled to an output of 1440p. The PS5 Pro defaults to 66.7%, which is actually 960p. And on the other end, the PS5 is slightly lower at 60%, which is 864p. This, admittedly, is a pretty small resolution bump, but where we can expect to see some improvements is with the inclusion of PSSR, which should result in a better looking and more stable final image, especially in motion. And sure enough, by looking at the comparisons, it's obvious that PSSR does actually provide a pretty great benefit in terms of stability. On the PS5, you can see flickering in multiple areas, such as the water and tree branches, which isn't present on the Pro. According to Jeremy Stieglitz, co-founder of Studio Wildcard and lead programmer, Ark Survival Ascended now uses virtual shadow maps for quote-unquote long-range and more accurate shadowing on the Pro console, whilst the base model still uses cascade shadow maps. In theory, this should improve shadow quality, but genuinely, from my own personal testing, I couldn't really tell much of a difference, if at all. This was honestly pretty strange to me, so I decided to use the in-game console to run commands to manually enable virtual shadow maps, otherwise known as VSM. And what I found was really interesting. Comparing the game's default appearance to VSM manually disabled and enabled, I found that without any modifications at all, the game looks much closer to VSM being toggled off. And sure enough, in each situation I tested, the game looks like it's not using it at all. I have no idea if this is a bug or a visual issue, but if there's anyone or any developer who can shed some light on this in the comments, that would honestly be pretty great. Before we start discussing the actual performance, I wanted to just quickly preface that unless you have a VRR compatible screen, I would strongly recommend having VSync enabled. This is a game with an extreme amount of frame tearing otherwise due to its constant frame time fluctuations. In these captures, I have VSync turned off to ensure that the frame rate isn't locked to 60 and can even go above it. First up, let's look at the performance of the default settings on each device, which means frame generation is on. The game hits the consoles pretty hard, causing the frame rate to be really variable on both, obviously depending on the scene. The original PS5 is often seen struggling to achieve 60 FPS and only very rarely holds onto it. The PS5 Pro, on the other hand, is performing around 18 to 19% better on average than the base model, and this can actually lead to a decent improvement over the original experience, considering that in some rare cases it can hit the mid-70s, and it looks better while doing it. In this specific scene in the city area of the map Extinction, we can see the frame rate tanking as soon as I go closer to the waterfall. This isn't limited to this one map, because areas with waterfalls in general are easily some of the worst performing scenes in the entire game. Where we can start to see how truly bad this game runs is when we turn off frame generation. Putting them side by side, it's pretty obvious how much of the weight it's pulling in the previous video comparisons. Frame gen is generally pretty close to doubling the frame rate, with FPS in the 30s being common without it, and sometimes even lower, like the mid to high 20s. And yes, even on the Pro. Although I haven't personally tested, it's been claimed that Ark Survival Ascended has received performance boosts compared to launch, but with the state the game is in, it's still extremely disappointing. If we focus in on how the game runs without frame generation on the PS5 against the Pro, we can see them both struggle hard, even when they're both running at sub Full HD resolution. I personally don't really see this as the ideal way of playing Ark, but considering it's a slower game, I don't hate the idea of using frame generation to achieve better performance, although I can't really justify the game using it as a crutch instead of just optimizing the game further. Overall, I'm glad that PSSR was added, but I still find the game's performance to be really flawed. But there is silver lining in this. Access to console commands allows us a huge amount of potential when it comes to customizing settings to our own liking. For example, we can turn off volumetric clouds for a roughly 15% improvement, or adjust resolution ourselves accordingly. The most popular adjustments I've found are disabling dynamic global illumination, which gives about 20% more performance, disabling volumetric fog, which nets a couple more FPS, or disabling shadows completely, which gives about an extra 10%. And there are many more, which I'll include some in the description below, so take a look if you're interested. A quick note on adjusting resolution. There's two ways to do this. The first way is using r.ScreenPercentage, which will adjust internal resolution, and the second way is r.SetRes, which caused issues in my experience. When I turned it on in conjunction with frame generation, the screen began to flicker really intensely, which I won't show due to epilepsy concerns. I thought it was important to mention, but just make sure to stick to r.ScreenPercentage unless you want to turn off frame generation first. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and especially if you're still here, thank you. I'll leave you guys to some bonus comparisons if you're wanting to see more, but otherwise enjoy and let me know your opinions or video suggestions in the comments.